Hello, today is July 23rd, and we are into the 40s of this Haizhen log series, and I am actually thinking a lot about time today. So that's what we're going to talk about, time as a construct. So today I was thinking about time, and how I got to this point was kind of like I started realizing yesterday that I was experiencing a little bit of rushing, or actually, I mentioned this, I think, a couple days ago as well, where I feel like in the middle of tasks to kind of like try to rush through them to get them done quicker, faster. And I think back to where this feeling kind of started, and I I think that it's prevalent in my home life growing up, and I think being within that is simply a function of just how the value that culture and society puts on speed. Speed seems to be this thing that has a lot of value, um, that has a lot of value when looking at like how efficient or how well you do something. And think about like even like in restaurants and stuff like that, like with work, for example. The speed at which something gets done is valued. The faster you can do something, the better that it is, right? Um, that's kind of the correlation. So then I guess over time, just living in the system and working in it, it gets internalized. Um, if I'm thinking now, like even think about writing tests. There's a time limit, right? There's always some kind of time limit when you're doing things. And it's often seen that the less time you take, the better that it is. And it's interesting to think about time with that value, and then think about how time is something that we've created, we've made up to measure something. I guess it's like the measuring stick of the amount of like input you need to get an output, and I guess time is that measurement. Um, from that sense, it's very useful. It's not the idea isn't that because time's a construct, it's not real, that it's not useful. It's like that idea of looking at models rather than what's truly real and what is kind of not real. If you look at time as a model, it helps us, like, how does it help you? How is it useful to you? Then you can also ask yourself, which situations is time not a good use, like is not good for you to use? And I'm thinking about that sometimes in like the act of doing things. If you're ever doing a task, realize that that task will take a certain amount of your time, your attention, and your energy. And to transfer and kind of move through that experience to get things done will just take the time that it takes, the amount of space that it takes. And then thinking in your head like that you have to do it faster doesn't necessarily make you have to do it faster. You could be actually more at risk of making an error, or missing a step, skipping steps just to get a particular outcome. And it's funny to me to still realize this over and over again. I think there are periods where it's not something that I feel rushed to do, like that constant feeling of needing to produce. And it just might be a function of like what's happening at the time or what's on my mind. Um, there was a time of conscious like pausing, of making the choice to do something other than work endlessly at a particular goal. There's nothing wrong with that. There are people that work that way. That's where generators and manifesting generators come in. With your consistent sacral energy, you can go and continue to do things and be lit up by those things that you enjoy. Ideally, if it's something that's gives you particular value, makes you feel like you're playing, or it's like a game, like those types of things, you get into those things, you can go and go and go. There are the other energy types, reflectors, manifestors, and projectors that don't have that innate energy. So even if we're doing something that we are really enjoying, like if I'm like really enjoying the process of making content, for example, it's not something that I can do consistently. I still need to take breaks, right? everybody needs to take breaks from different things, and sometimes that break piece is productive. Um, Thought about another way, like generators and manifesting generators, if like rest is your thing, you could probably do that unendingly, whereas other people um, might feel that they have to go and be up and active and do other things. So how does that all relate to time? Like that time is this odd thing that we can use as a useful model. And then even now, if you were to sit for a moment, right, and make sure that you don't see any clocks, there's no numbers on this video down at the bottom, and you sit and consider what the passage of time feels like. Um, could you? Because in the model of time, the time is always flowing and moving. And at the same time, if you sit there without any outside indicators and just release all thoughts of, you know, I have to be doing this, I have to be doing that, just for a moment, can you feel time passing? And then that takes me to the thought of, if you can't feel time moving, then is it there? Or is there something, another explanation, right? Like maybe this moment, the moment that we're sharing together as you're listening to me, is the only thing that exists right now. Outside of it, when you go on to your future, you'll still be in this present moment. And that future may not match what you thought you'd be doing. Like maybe you had plans to go. Once I was going to head out to the park with the kids and the family, and we walked outside, and I looked on the driveway. I couldn't find my car, and I was like, "Oh, hey, did I park my car on like another street?" And it turns out my car got stolen. So sometimes like things get in your way. Like I thought later that day I would be going to the park rather than going to the police to report a stolen vehicle, right? So wherever you end up, it's hard because you know that you can't predict specifically where you'll be. You sometimes will have um, a very accurate prediction, right? A lot of the times in our day to day, it's very accurate. For example, like you wake up and you know kind of the things that you're going to do and what the rest of your day looks like. You have a calendar and everything that's all laid out. You might be doing things that are familiar to you that you've done before. And that's kind of the day to day, like where you can just shut off and forget about thinking about what you have to do throughout the day. And at the same time, going through life like that, going through time as if it's unchanging, like you're just continuing to do the same thing over and over again, is a little bit of a mindset, because even though you're getting up to do the same kind of overall activities and maybe the outcomes are the same, there is so much that you can notice, even on your walks to the station, if you take bus or transit, or on your drive. Like you can notice an endless amount of things if you look for that. So every day can be different, and that's kind of what marks things out. And that's, I think, one of the things that I'm mindful of, especially when I'm like observing my kids, because it's easy to get trapped or stuck in a mindset where the person that's in front of you, that's growing and changing every single day, kind of reaches a point and stays that way for a number of years. It's more prevalent when the kids are young because they have so many developmental milestones and everything is kind of new. And even as they get older, there's still a lot of new things. There's a lot of like nuance and development that happens, and conversations that you can have, and activities that you can do together, and just the way that they interact. They'll change right before your eyes, and it's so easy to miss all of that. Um, and it's so interesting that we're thinking about time as this thing that flows from the past to the future. And at the same time, everything just always happens now. Like everything that's changing and developing is unfolding in this moment, and it kind of continues to move forward. And the same for like kids and people. Why is it that the the kind of common thought is, or why is it that the thought that I grew up with of growing up, like getting to a certain age and then being kind of like this fixed identity for a long period of time. We see that in a lot of like older television where the characters are, they develop, but maybe not in very robust ways. It's just kind of the same notes played in different orders type of thing. But it's not like a same instrument or whatever. It's not like changing a completely different instrument. Maybe it's not even like using notes to begin with. We don't often see that kind of development. Or we do, but we don't notice it as that. Sometimes it's just marked off as like, this person just completely changed. Like, I don't know what happened. For example, like when you see a person after a number of time of not interacting with them, they could be completely different, right? So all this says to me is to remember to pause and that the rest is okay. Pausing in just existing. I learned this from my child. One of the ways that she responds to me is she says, if I ask her, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? She'll say, existing. I was like, cool. It's like, is this snarky or is it just an accurate statement, right? Like, I'm just existing. That's all that I have for you today. So I'm taking some time to pause in the middle of all of this process, to not feel like rushing and pushing through, and giving myself the space to allow this whole process to unfold the way that it needs to unfold. I think one of the things that has stopped me, so I don't know if I said it here or anywhere else, but I was thinking of opening up my calendar so that people could slot themselves in and book services and whatever, all of that stuff. And then it kind of makes me then think of like the format that I would deliver the Haizhen Transformation program in, which is like, if it's like a course that you can listen to with kind of like weekly check-ins and kind of like having to be in a particular space or position at the same time every week. I think having that like regularity is helpful to drive things forward. And at the same time, if things are not meant to drive forward, like it's not the right pace, then being in those things might take you away from something else that you might have to do. A whole different experience that you might be having to have, or just rest and time and pause in between. And it kind of like gives me pause because like the way that I really enjoy working actually is kind of on a like as needed basis, which is to say like what your need is the kind of next step or next piece that I can give to you. And I feel like people are kind of in different spaces, which is okay. And they might kind of go through content at different paces as well. So I think like when I was talking about action yesterday, I think the action that feels right is to start connecting with people one-on-one and moving this program forward in a, I don't know if it's like in a less structured way, and maybe a structure will emerge. Like for sure, a structure is going to emerge. I think it's partly the realization that I could lay out a whole structure, and I know kind of like if I'm doing like a hypnosis session or something like that, I used to plan this out. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'll say these things, and then I'll go through this kind of induction, and then this is the script, not script, but these are the kind of like the kind of like general ideas that I might introduce, or the protocol that I would use, and then I would get into a session and realize that it's like, oh, like I'm just feeling a pull to go in different directions, right? What I found was early on, there were times where I'm like, I made a plan, I'm going to do my best to stick to it, and then I stick to the plan, and then the work didn't feel as it didn't feel as impactful because I wasn't going with my instinct. So now when I'm working, it's the realization that it's a process of like guiding the other person. And for me, it's not so much about what I'm doing per se. I like to think of it more as the space that I'm holding for you to explore the space that you hold, if that makes sense. And I think that looks different for different people. Maybe the difference is the level of commitment, possibly, to making that change. Because I know everybody's lives are like super busy and everything. Um, and your priorities are shifting all the time, right? You have work, you have family, you have kids, you have friends, and then who knows whatever else that you're up to. So there's all these shifting priorities. How do you put them all together and align them? And then how do I, as a person that's here saying like, if you know yourself better, then all the different aspects of your life will change and improve because you can experience them as yourself. You can experience them like fully without distortion or with minimal distortion, or to be able to identify the distortions that you're observing. Like, I think that's very much the process. It's this ongoing process of observing and reflecting, and then seeing where the reflections have distortions, and then kind of like smoothing them out. It's like reframing your experience, changing the way that you look at things, and that's kind of how change can happen almost instantaneously. Uh, that idea of time or needing time to move or get past something is definitely one way of working through that, because given enough time, like I mentioned earlier, like you don't see somebody for 10 years and they come back and they're like completely different, all different interests and ways of dressing and mannerisms. Maybe they'll be different. There'll be some things that are the same, but it could be different on some fundamental level, right? So then time is one way because it creates that dissociation that a lot of little things can happen. And that's why if you're doing little things, like making little shifts at a time incrementally, that will take time. But then the difference between that beginning and that end point is your mindset shift. And when you shift that and reframe everything, right? Like if you flipped the meaning of something 180 degrees and you truly felt and believed that and knew that in your core to be true, then it wouldn't take any time at all. You just move from wanting to make a change, knowing that a change needs to happen, and then simply making it, simply making the the mindset change. And then what happens is when you assign a new meaning to those feelings that you had before, your actions will change. And then that's where you can start to make the actions. And that's how that process of going through that period of doing those incremental steps can feel easier. You could go through and think about a new habit that you're trying to engage in and think to yourself like, oh, this is so hard, I don't want to do this, like it's going to be so much work, but when I get to that particular day, then everything's going to be great. um, but then you get there, you get to that time, maybe it sticks for a while, and then it like snaps back at some point, potentially. If you have that mindset change at the beginning, then it doesn't become like you're doing anything, right? It's like you don't do breathing, it just happens. So the things that you think about, like even walking, like do you do walking or do you just walk? Um, so getting to that point and having that reframe and that shift are things that hypnosis is really great for. Um, so that's where like really deep work can happen. And then with the human design piece, that's this part that's this piece of it that you can revisit, and almost like looking in a mirror and seeing what sits well, or what kind of is like nudging at you to look at it. Like, hey, this is what's next. And then with your strategy and authority, it gives you a way of um, understanding what is the most aligned action for you. And then with your signature and not self theme, it gives you the way of understanding whether you are acting in your aligned core essence or if you are somewhere else. Yeah. So take some time to pause once in a while. We'll see you later. Bye.